Hello, Eternal Weekend Recap enjoyers. Maxtortion here with some really exciting news. Last week, I was fortunate enough to be crowned this year's Vintage Champion. That's right, I won the Vintage Championship at Eternal Weekend Pittsburgh in 2024. So this recap is obviously going to cover that quite a bit, but really what we're going to cover is my preparation, getting to Pittsburgh, buying some Power 9, top 8ing Vintage, getting a solid 8-3 in Legacy, buying more Power 9, winning Vintage, and then buying even more Power 9. I'm also going to go into detail on the Esper Lurrus deck that I used to win the Vintage Champs, including voiceover coverage of my stream matches in the semifinals and finals, and I'll even throw in a little sideboard guide for you too. I'm also going to talk about mental health and tournament magic, and what I do to take care of myself in a tournament to help give me the best chance of winning, but also to help ensure that my opponents and I have a good tournament experience, win or lose. And of course, I'm also going to talk Legacy and talk about my Audible off of Nadu and onto Sneak and Show, putting up that strong 8-3 record. So first of all, my preparation. So for Vintage, what I did is I played honestly about only 3 leagues in the last few weeks of Vintage. I knew that I wanted to play Esper Lurrus because I love a fair Esper deck, as followers of the channel know. And it's also with cards I had access to. I had to borrow a few pieces of power to get there, but I do own most of the cards in this deck. And then I was able to leverage, my kind of fair blue skill set that I have from Legacy in Vintage. It's a familiar experience. It's not relearning something that's crazy or different. It's just playing solid, straightforward, fair blue Magic that I love to play, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. So the reason I played only 3 or so leagues is I wanted to play enough that I would run into the expected matchups, try out my sideboarding configurations, make sure that I liked the cards I was playing in the deck, make swaps as needed, and then not overtune the deck, which is really where I personally tend to go into my own pitfalls, is sometimes I will play too much and run into kind of weird situations and be like, oh no, I have a hole in this plan, and if this exact really rare thing happens, I'm screwed. And so to prevent myself from over-tuning the deck to basically play around these crazy weird situations that very rarely come up, to gain ground there and lose ground in the more common situations, I wanted to just play enough that I knew what I was doing going into it and not over-tune. What I did do is I played a lot of Nadu in Legacy in preparation. I figured out exactly the card choices I wanted. There didn't seem to be an established Nadu list, which kind of made a lot of things quite difficult as far as, deviating from stock or playing stock or what have you. So I tried to build up a Nadu deck that I felt good with, and honestly, I couldn't quite get it to a point that I felt comfortable. I was not good against Eldrazi. I felt kind of against Mystic Forge, and as we well know, those were big matchups to feel strong against. I did feel good against the blue-black decks, but it felt just not quite comfortable in my hands. I was kind of scared playing it. And so I also brought the cards for Sneak and Show, minus the actual sneak attacks and extra Atraxes and stuff that I just didn't own. So I ended up buying those on site. Spoiler alert. But anyway, let's talk about my getting to Pittsburgh. So I live a little bit south of LA in Southern California, and Pittsburgh is, on the northeast side of the United States. And flying west to east, typically what happens on this 5-6 hour flight is, because of the time change, you lose an additional 3 hours. And so I went to school in New York, and so I dreaded the flight during the day because I lost a whole day. If you leave LAX at 9 a.m. and take a 6-hour flight, you're arriving at 6 p.m., which means you woke up at something 6 a.m. in California to get to your 9 a.m. flight, and then you're arriving at 6 p.m. in New York. You get off, get really off the airport to your hotel around 8 p.m. You've lost your entire day, and I don't like doing that. And so as a dad of small children, I'm kind of used to the idea of not having that much sleep, and so I figured that I could red-eye it, because I used to do that during college, because spending that time, that 9-hour shift during the night, you end up getting both days. And then also with regard to correcting for jet lag, if you're actually nice and tired the first day, it's a lot easier to get to sleep at a time that your body thinks is 8 p.m., but is actually 11 o'clock on the East Coast. So I do like the red-eye flight. However, I made the first misplay of the weekend is I booked a red-eye with a connection. If you've ever booked a red-eye with a connection, I'm sorry. And if you've never booked a red-eye with a connection, don't. Turns out that you don't get continuous sleep when you have a connection, which should be obvious, but wasn't obvious to me when I was booking the flight. So the first leg of the trip was from LAX to Chicago, which is supposed to be a 4-hour flight. So I got on the plane. We were, taxiing for takeoff, and the pilot says, good news. Due to the tailwinds, this flight is going to be less than 4 hours. It's only going to be 3 hours and 21 minutes. And this is when I planned to sleep. So I was just like, no, you're not. Slow down. Take the 4 hours, please. But no, the pilot insisted that getting to Chicago at 4:21 a.m. is much better than getting to Chicago at 5 a.m., which I'm not sure anyone on that plane really agreed on, but we're at the mercy of the pilot, so here we were. I got about maybe 2.5 hours of sleep on that flight. And then, fortunately, I was able to meet up with a friend of mine who flew in from Portland, also to Chicago, and we were on the same second leg of the trip from Chicago to Pittsburgh. And so we were able to kind of chat and keep each other awake while in the Chicago airport at ungodly hours of the morning, and got on the flight, got to Pittsburgh nice and early, met some friends who were already there, had a nice breakfast, got to the venue, and here's what we did at the venue, or here's at least what I did at the venue. So people who watch the channel know that I play quite a lot of Magic Online and often do pretty well. And I'm fortunate enough to have accrued a pretty significant bank of Magic Online tickets that I was able to sell to people after putting out some feelers on social media. And I sold about 3,500 Magic Online tickets and went around to vendors and found a really cool pickup. I purchased a Mox Sapphire for a little bit north of $3,000. And that's the first piece of power that I own, and I'm really, really excited to have owned it. And I got to play with it in the Friday Vintage Swiss. So that was sweet. Getting to play with your own cards is really, really cool, especially when it's something like the Power 9. So yeah, I put away the Mox Sapphire that I had borrowed and sleeved this one up instead. And then after doing that, it kind of felt like chump change to go pick up those missing pieces for Sneak and Show. I had most of the blue stuff. I was missing some of the very specific Sneak and Show cards, like Show and Tells and Sneak Attacks, a couple of Traxas, a couple Emrakul's, one Omniscience. And so I went around to vendors and bought an actually mismatched set, but what you gonna do? And then I went to try out Sneak and Show in person in the Early Bird Legacy Challenge that Card Titan put on for people who were there at the venue right when the first tournament started. And Sneak and Show went very well. I managed to 3-0, 6-0 the event. And by that time, by the end of it, my hotel was available to check in. So I packed up my stuff, went to the hotel room, checked in, and I went to sort out this vintage deck that you see here. I actually swapped out a Snapcaster Mage for this Nethergoyf at the last moment, just kind of thinking about wanting to be ahead on tempo compared to most decks. And yeah, actually, let's do a quick dive into how I built this deck compared to the stock lists. I really like Esper decks that play stable mana. And so I noticed that in my testing, most of the times that I would lose or where I couldn't get my mana out from under me, and most of the times I was winning are when I could cast my spells. And so compared to your typical Esper decks or typical, vintage decks in general, I am playing a Lotus Petal, I'm playing 2 Lorien Revealed, I'm playing only 3 Wastelands. I'm doing all of these choices in order to get stable mana. I'm playing 2 Ponders. So I have 17 initial blue sources in this deck. I have 15 initial white, and I have 14 initial black. And most blue-black Lurrus decks are playing between 13 and 14 initial blue sources. So what I'm really doing here is I'm saying I want my mana to function. And so the cards I'm not playing are stuff like Mishra's Bauble, which is kind of a backwards piece of cardboard. You don't know what to evaluate when you're evaluating your opening hand. You don't know if it's a land or not. And adding things like the Lotus Petal, which help enable turn 1 Frog or turn 1 Lavinia. Lavinia, locks out your opponents pretty quickly. Turn 1 Frog makes up that petal that you spent within a turn of attacking. And also does things like plays around Daze, lets you hold up Spell Pierce. I really like the Lotus Petal. And so, yeah, I did that. I played the Netherglyph, as I mentioned. I'm playing a Dress Down in the main deck, kind of as a nod to Oath of Druids, because, you can put it on off of Show and Tell, their Traxxas and Trigger, or you can put it in like on the upkeep, same deal. I'm only playing 2 Orcish Bowmasters because outside of the mirror, I don't think they're that good. Like Jewel eventually, gets a 1 ring down and they no longer deal damage, and then they win in the same turn. And then still playing like 2 Spell Pierce, 3 Force Negation, 4 Force of Will. And then I'm playing a Vexing Bauble in the main deck kind of as a extra Lavinia. Another way to leverage being on the play against an opponent is to like drop a turn 1 Vexing Bauble. And of course you can sacrifice it when you no longer want it, or you can just like recast it with Lurrus as a 2-mana draw card. So I like these choices that I made here. Obviously they served me well throughout the tournament, but I just wanted to give a little bit of rationale on why I did those things. So anyway, yeah, I built this deck with the choices that you just heard me justify here. And then I went out to dinner with some friends. And after dinner, my friends were going to go to the Drury Plaza Hotel for some drinks and gaming. I think they called it LobbyCon. And I felt myself fading because I got 2.5 hours of sleep the night prior. And so I went back to my hotel room and passed out. And honestly, I think that was the best decision I made the entire event. I got a full 8 hours of sleep, falling asleep at like 9 p.m., waking up 5 a.m. Friday morning, so I could take a nice slow morning in my hotel, take a nice shower, get dressed, hydrate really well. I put a liquid IV in my my water bottle, which I will keep very full. I'll talk about that more in a minute. I went to get a bacon, egg, and cheese on a bagel, a Blue Monster energy drink as my caffeine of choice, and make my way to the convention center so I wouldn't feel rushed. So before I get into the round by round of Vintage, I wanted to share some of my personal secrets for tournament success. Divulge it all. And so personally, I find that I play best when my body is incredibly well hydrated to the point where I have to refill my water bottle after every round, usually also meaning I have to pee after every round too. And then I keep myself a little bit hungry, like peckish. Like, yeah, I could go eat. That level hungry. Not starving, but definitely not full. I don't know if there's any real science behind this, but I feel like when you're a little bit hungry, you're sharp because you need a successful hunt, like going back to the hunter-gatherer stage of our existence. If you're full and that wild boar gets away or whatever, it's no big deal. You'll get the next one. You're full. You're satisfied. You've got boars to spare. So I don't let myself get full. I keep myself sharp, and I carefully maintain this level of peckish by like snacking on Nature Valley bars or some trail mix, stuff like that throughout the day. And also when I started to slow down on that breakfast sandwich that I got, I tossed it. Big disclaimer, this is what personally works for me. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Find what works for you and your body, but the most important thing is that you're paying attention to your body. You're listening to its cues. And in doing so, you're doing what my therapist calls grounding techniques to control your anxiety. Also, with regard to, controlling your anxiety and staying in a good headspace, these are the things that I prioritize. So going into a long tournament, I know I'm going to be faced with a lot of decisions, and going over the whole event, I'm going to make some mistakes. I know this already. Before they happen, I know I'm going to make mistakes. Even the best player in the room is going to make some mistakes. Nathan Stewart, if you're watching this and you made no mistakes, I'm sorry, please correct me. If you're not Nathan Stewart, you're going to make some mistakes. I'm a pretty good player, but I was not the best player at Eternal Weekend, and yeah, I definitely made some mistakes. And I accept that I will make these mistakes. I'll accept that I have made them once I will. I know that some mistakes will be like little absent-minded things where I overlook something. Some will be where I evaluate all the factors but just make the wrong decision anyway. And I set out with the goal in mind of not spending energy on what could have been if I hadn't made the mistake, but instead to focus on the present. Okay, I made a mistake. This is the situation that I'm in now. Now what? How do I best proceed from where I am? This keeps me from spiraling, tilting, or compounding mistakes into larger ones. I also want to make sure that I treat every opponent with dignity and respect, and I do my best to be a kind, friendly opponent that makes every effort to play a clean, fair match of Magic, win or lose. Honestly, it's a really special thing to have traveled to this large, prestigious tournament, to play these high-stakes matches of Magic against people who did the same thing. I think it's really important to avoid main character syndrome type behaviors, like thinking that your opponent is just some like NPC obstacle on your blocking your way to your victory. And instead you have to kind of realize that you and your opponent are both equally valid, fully realized, living, breathing people. And neither one of you is entitled to a match win, regardless of the matchup, mulligans, top decks, or what have you. What you're entitled to is the social contract, that you're treated with respect and dignity, and that the match you play abides by the rules of the game, and your opponent is entitled to the same thing. To this end, in addition to being kind and treating my opponents with respect, I do my best to make sure the game state is very clearly communicated. Most of the time my opponents will do this back, but even sometimes if they don't start this way, they'll start to mirror my behavior. So clearly communicating the game state is mutually beneficial. Also, as far as being, this kind, courteous opponent, if you're not fully convinced by the social contract stuff, maybe I can convince you it's literally in your best interest from an EV perspective as well. Once you're able to fully recognize your opponent as this intelligent human being, not just this NPC that plays stock MTG Goldfish list and makes prescribed plays, you can start to figure out what your opponent's personality is like, understand their play style, and you can adjust yours accordingly, while also recognizing that your opponent, as this living, intelligent human being, is doing the same to you. And if you don't recognize your opponent's humanity, you're going to miss out on the second half of this dance and be blindsided when they do things like play something that's not stock, or make this really cool play that you didn't see coming because it's not expected. Moreover, the first tiebreaker in Magic is your opponent's match win rate. This means that your opponents, the better they do, the better your standing is going to be. And if you belittle or demean your opponent, tell them they only won because they got lucky or whatever version of salty comment you think applies to the match at hand, you're probably going to make them feel bad. You're going to take away from the victory. You're going to hurt their confidence, and you're going to damage their headspace in future matches. That will make them less likely to win their future rounds, and that's going to hurt your tiebreakers. It's literally in your best interest for your opponent to walk away from the table, win or lose, feeling positive, confident, and ready to take on the rest of their day. You want your opponents to do well, and you want to set them up to do so. Your opponents doing well is good for your tournament success too. And the better your opponents do, the better your tiebreakers are, the better your final standing will be. So in addition to it being the right thing to do, to be, this kind, respectful opponent, it's literally in your best interest. So just do it. So now I'm going to go into the round by round of what I faced in Vintage and how it broke. I'm not going to go super into detail on the matches that weren't recorded, so I can spend a lot of time on the semifinals and finals and literally commentate over the recorded broadcast. So round 1, I faced one mono white initiative, and I lost game 1, won games 2 and 3. So typically, when I see my opponent not present a companion, I'm thinking that there's a pretty good chance there's a lot of decks they could be on, like Oath, or Doomsday, or Jewel, or Dredge, or all these things that really make me want to have a hand that can answer combo. And so if I'm mulliganing, I'm going to be binning things like Source to Plowshares and keeping things like Force of Will and Wasteland. And so against Initiative, obviously that's not exactly where I want to be. And so when I'm mulliganing, I often tend to lose game 1 against Initiative. So yeah, lost game 1 against Initiative, and then games 2 and 3, I have this extra removal to bring in. I brought in the Fatal Pushes, and a couple consigned memories. I'll get into the sideboard in a minute, or I guess at the end of the recap, I'll get into the sideboard guide. And then I got the match 2-1. Round 2, same thing happened. I lost game 1 and won games 2 and 3. Round 3, I played against Blue-Black Lurrus Tempo. My opponent revealed Lurrus, and I got that match 2-0. I really do like the Blue-Black Fair Mirrors. I feel very comfortable there. Round 4, my opponent was on Oath of Druids and won it 2-0. He played really well, had some strong draws. I never really felt in it. Round 5, I was against Sultai Midrange, Bug Midrange, and I won pretty easily, 2-0, pretty straightforward. Round 6 was against my friend Brandon, who actually was the one who convinced me to play a second Lorien Revealed in the deck, so thanks, Brandon. We had a really close match, and I narrowly eked it out. I won 2-1. And I think I won in turns. It was really, really tight. And then round 7, I played against Jim, who played this Grixis combo, kind of like 2-card Monty style deck. Really, really cool list. You can check it out. It was JM Kinch if you look up the username. But yeah, cool list. I was a little bit fortunate to win. I won 2-0. Round 8, my opponent was again on Oath of Druids. This time, I drew pretty well. I lost game 1 because I'm not that well equipped to answer Oath in game 1, but as you can see, my sideboard has the for containment priests and stuff like that to be pretty good post board. So I won games 2 and 3 and then beat Oath. And then round 9 for the win and in for top 8, I played against Monoweight Initiative for the 3rd time, lose game 1 against Monoweight Initiative, win games 2 and 3, and just like that, I'm in the top 8 of Vintage. Pretty cool. So after I top 8'd Vintage, what I did is I went over to one of the vendors who I know likes to deal in high-end stuff. And I told him that I was fortunate enough to just top 8 Vintage and wondering if he was making offers on the foil Tinker. He told me he was. He gave me what his cash price would be. He gave me what his store credit price would be. And I responded that what I was really looking for is to convert that Tinker into 2 pieces of power, a heavily played Ancestral Recall and a heavily played Time Walk, playing power for myself. And he said that that price about lines up. So we looked through what he had to offer. We found 2 pieces that just about matched the price that he had for store credit. I put my name down. We shook hands on it. And right before the top 8 started on Sunday, as soon as I got the Tinker, I ran over to him. I handed him the Tinker and I picked up these bad boys. So pieces of power 2 and 3 were required. And so I took the borrowed Time Walk and borrowed Ancestral out of my deck. I put my own pieces in and I commenced battling Dave Kaplan for the quarterfinals match. I had actually never had the opportunity to interact with him before. But yeah, I met him and we sat down to play and he was 4th seed. I was 5th. And I'm going to sound a little bit crazy for a minute, but I felt very confident in my match going into him, even though I was, in the mirror on the draw and he's a phenomenal player. I was 5th seed in the top 8. And every time I am 5th seed in the top 8, I lose in the finals. I don't know how, but it always seems to happen. I've lost to PTQs that way. I played the Legacy Magic Cup in Vegas a month ago. I was 5th seed, lost in the finals. It happens to me every single time I can remember. So I was pretty confident that I was going to win because I have to win to lose in the finals. And so we start off where he goes land, Mox, go. And then I play a Mox before I play a land. He dazes it, floating black, flashes in a Bowmaster. And I kind of black out for a bit. And then I wake up about to win the second game of our match. So I win 2-0. And at that point, what I have is I have a Lavinia in play, an Orcish Bowmaster in play, and a 5/5 Orc Army in play because he just resolved an Ancestral Recall and I was able to, throw the triggers at him. So at this point, Dave is at 3 life. I have a Lavinia in play. He's not able to play Moxen to accelerate. He casts a Swords to Plowshares. I ask him to clarify which target he chooses my Orc Army. And then I attack him for 3, which ends up being lethal. He shakes my hand, wishes me luck. And so now we get to dive into the top 4. And so for the top 4 and the finals, I'm actually going to go camera off so that I can kind of just voice over record on the matches as being played. I was able to get the raw footage from Anurag. Speaking of which, Anurag, thank you so much for everything you did for this tournament and do for tournaments in general. You are the backbone holding up competitive Magic, and every single accolade you get isn't the half of what you deserve. So yeah, let's hop into the top 4.
Like, people have tried calling me Dave,
so
and like, no.
Here we are for the top 4. I'm playing against David Tao, who I actually just met a few minutes prior to this match starting. Just establishing a friendly rapport, and he's actually a really nice guy. I went out to dinner with him after the event, and we had both rewatched the match at this point and read Twitch chat, and we were both mad on each other's behalfs. I think people interpreted things to be adversarial in a way that they were not. Even though this is, a high stakes match with like whatever $1,000 or more on the line, neither one of us treated it that way. We were both treating it like a good high stakes match of Magic. And so as you can see, we're both keeping our 7s. Since I'm the higher seed, I'm on the play. I'm basically looking at my hand and I'm leading with the Nethergoyf. So since I don't have the hard graveyard, Oath a hate, kind of graveyard hate, Containment Priest is what I mean, in my deck in game 1, my best hope is to kind of tempo David out. I don't have the combo finish of Bowmaster plus Time Twister either, so I have to deal David 20. And so putting creatures on the board is essentially a must. That said, Nethergoyf gets the clock going early, and I'm leading leaving up the Lotus Petal because that means I could Spell Pierce. And so I'm hoping that he plays something that I'm able to pretty easily Spell Pierce. So this play right here of the Pearl, Pearl's like almost a colorless Mox in his deck, so it didn't seem important enough to pierce, especially when he can lead with something like an Oath or a Show and Tell. Very important Spell Pierce targets. So I untap, draw for turn, and I find a Lorien revealed. At this point, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to grow my graveyard. So my plan is to cycle Lorien revealed, get a white source, and then I have another Glyph that's 2/3. And if I sack the petal, it grows larger, but I'm not just going to sack the petal for no gain if I can use it to utilize actual, usable mana. So this setup I have here with the face cams, the hand cams and stuff, I was actually able to set up from Anurag's raw footage, so I hope you like it. Also, with regard to leaving the table sound on, that was intentional. I feel like as viewers, you guys and myself also can gain quite a bit from what's being said at the table and get better context for the match. So again, Ponder, another sorcery. So this isn't growing my Nether Glyph, but it is important to sculpt my hand and figure out what I need. I'm going to draw the Mox Jet and play it. If it, potentially gets countered for some reason pre-combat, it would grow the Nether Glyph, so it's right to do on the first main phase. But it doesn't. So Nether Glyph will come in for 2. So at the end of turn, David has a action. And he's going to fetch a vintage staple, as he just said. And what is it?
Very good. Very good.
His budget land. It's it looked like it did very well for him. And here, like a little bit of extra card selection is great for Oath, because Oath needs to find the right parts of their deck, and Hedge Maze is exactly that. Helps them find. So he looks at the top of his library and just bins a turn. No more dead draw there. I'm holding the Spell Pierce, really hoping that I get a good target with it. But David's playing around it really well. You can see he's leading on this Emerald here, and I can't pierce it because he has 2 mana up. So no reaction from me. It's a land. Now I'm really hoping he casts a Show and Tell. He doesn't, but I was hoping he did. So he does I do an untap, I draw a Tundra. At this point, my plan is to Time Walk and then DT for an Ancestral Recall, because that seems like a pretty powerful play. And maybe I'll be able to get him to tap low enough that the Spell Pierce will be live. So that's kind of my plan at this point. Another thing I could have done here, instead of casting the DT, was put Lurrus into my hand. But I was really hoping to gain the card advantage first, because I needed more interaction. And out of my graveyard, the only thing that I could really do is recast the Lotus Petal for free. And so, of the 2 plays, DT seemed a little bit more powerful, but it is going to prompt a Flusterstorm from David. Not ideal. And again, another sorcery in my yard, so I have 1 land and 4 sorceries for a very sad 2/3 Nether Glyph. It's usually bigger, I promise. Let's let the game catch up to my commentary here. He Flusterstorms it, or he's thinking about it. David, I noticed in this game, one thing I'm really doing here is I'm trying to learn how David plays. I know he's a strong player from his reputation, but I've never had an opportunity to play against him before. So I'm trying to learn his overall play style, and so far I've learned that he plays very safely and conservatively. And so cards like Daze or Spell Pierce, like soft counterspells, are usually weaker against this sort of player. Against Oath, it's not so weak that I'd be cutting Spell Pierce, but I can't lean on it as heavily as I otherwise would. Now I'm trying to figure out what to do. I have a Treasure Cruise I think I want to cast, but I'm going to send in the Nether Glyph first because the graveyard is going to shrink. So this is the infamous spot where I miscast Treasure Cruise. Basically, The thing that I'm conflating, I know that a lot of people are joking about it, is that you usually delve. Treasure Cruise costs 8 mana, and you usually delve 7 cards. And so I was just conflating the 8 and the 7. And so I just exiled. I was counting to 8 instead of to 7 on the delve. And I took one too many cards out. But because I had a floating mana, this is a pretty awkward judge call. You're not allowed to over delve. But because I just have this floating mana sitting here, the ruling was actually, I'm going to rush ahead. The ruling here was actually that I legally cast the spell and left my mana floating. So my intent of whatever using the floating mana was basically not acknowledged. I was trying to explain what I was trying to do here and leave the petal in my graveyard. I was really doing this for the size of the Netherglyph. That's the thing that matters here. But long story short, it's not going to work out in my favor. And I'm going to jump ahead real quick to get to where we need to be. So I'm actually going to bring the table sound all the way up as the judge comes back.
All right. So we had this die here representing the mana.
Nice.
And then we went to cast this. We tapped 2. We picked up our graveyard. We counted it all out, and that was our delve. So it sounds to me like we've represented that we are paying 2 mana, and then we are delving our graveyard away. And then we still have this mana floating that was not used as part of casting. And I do recommend that we are very clear, very concise in the future about how we represent our floating mana.
Okay.
So that we don't have these issues going forward.
Okay, so mistake with the die is being maintained. This is an exile?
That is exile.
Okay.
Yep.
Alright, the Pyroblast is resolved. Sorry, this is in graveyard.
Yeah, that is in the graveyard, yeah.
And then I'll plus 2.
So anyway, at this point you can see that instead of letting this tilt me or what have you and get really flustered and upset, I just accept it as it comes and try not to worry about it. I made a mistake, got a little bit burned for it, and now David's resolving an Ancestral Recall, and honestly that's a lot more impactful than my little Lotus Petal mistake on the Treasure Cruise. So I'm behind, and it's not necessarily because of my mistake, it's because he resolved Ancestral, is now casting an Oath, and he has a lot of counter magic backup. That said, I didn't even have a way to answer it, so I drew Dig Through Time, which I am far away from casting. I have a Spell Pierce that is nowhere close to being useful, and I'm going to attack with Netherglyph, and I'm going to put Lurrus in my hand because I have no better actions. I'm going to switch the sleeve. Between matches, I put Lurrus in a different sleeve so that there's no way I accidentally shuffle the Lurrus into my deck. But that is at least what I'm doing here. Because I also make sure that I kind of put Lurrus near my main deck so that I don't forget to reveal. So Atraxa comes off. A lot of cards will get flipped. Very powerful stuff. You'll notice that he flips a Bulls' Citadel and has the option to, as he flips this Show and Tell right there, has an option to do Show and Tell Citadel and kind of go ham. And one thing I'm learning about him right now is that he doesn't pick that. He does pick the Show and Tell, but because it's his only sorcery, but he doesn't pick the Bulls' Citadel. He picks the Lotus Petal. And so from this, something that I'm taking away from this is that when David's ahead like he is playing in a way to make sure that he can't lose. So that Lotus Petal is his black source. We know from looking at his hand cam right now that he has a Demonic Tutor in hand. And so...
You can draw, I just want to, before you pick them up.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, yeah, his Demonic Tutor in hand, he wants that petal so he can cast it. Because his plan is to DT for Time Walk, which that makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, Show and Tell Bulls' Citadel could win by a lot more than that, but David has realized correctly that winning by more is not necessary. He can win by just the right amount, and that's just a DT for Time Walk. So even though it looks like I'm just playing garbage time here, what I'm really doing, since I've, again, never played against David before, is learning about him. Learning how he plays, learning how he makes decisions, and using that to help guide how I play against him in games 2 and 3.
Oh, petal, yes.
Yeah, so It's all good. I'm just trying to make sure everything is correct. Also, there's a non-zero chance that, I draw, Caracas and the perfects and all of that and somehow run away with this game.
Knowledge when it happens.
But very, very unlikely. But again, at a match that has, more than $1,000 stakes attached to it, it's worth doing. I want to play to my outs. This match is untimed, and so there's no point conceding early to have time for game 2 and 3, because there's going to be time for games 2 and 3. So this brainstorm right here, what Dave is doing is he's putting his Atraxas on top so that he doesn't mill out too much of his library, and he does get the trigger for them still. So again, really safe, conservative play from David. That means that he is not going to give me an inch. And that's really good to know because I can just understand his play. So yeah, I'm sitting there kind of just taking it all in. Looks like I'm just kind of milking the camera time, but no, I'm trying to learn. Yep, so what's that? Atraxa on top? Very nice.
That makes sense. You do get
Yeah, he keeps the one that can attack, the other in the yard, and flips, the other Atraxa he put back a bunch of creatures, flips up a Seiju. And so my out of Caracas is no longer relevant. However, you'll notice in a minute, he does something with the Seiju that I will find interesting.
Land,
Yes.
enchantment, and I will not
Yeah.
put a creature in my hand.
Okay.
Yeah, so he chooses to not put the Atraxa in his hand, leave it in the library in case he wants to draw it later on. But
Want to draw a step?
Yes.
Would you like to write these down?
Oh, sure. Oath, Besage.
yeah, so he actually reminds me to write these down, which is nice. A little bit of foreshadowing. Yeah, I am kind of used to Moto in the sense of revealed cards stay revealed, and I can just kind of click through them. I do play Paper Magic maybe like twice a month. It's Legacy, and it's at LGS level, and a lot of us will just kind of play with our hands revealed until we brainstorm, just as a kind of casual, friendly thing. And so I'm just not as used to writing revealed cards down as I should be, and that's a little bit of a fault on my end.
You got it.
Yeah, Oko in play,
I will create a
very powerful planeswalker, one of the most busted. Makes the food one of the most busted artifacts. Kidding about that part. So he plays the Boseiju. I find that really interesting because to me that means that Caracas might be more of an out to me than I had originally anticipated. So he discards the hand size, putting away a bunch of blue spells, oaths, keeping a bunch of blue spells and forces and all that jazz. His hand is stacked. I'm about to get Taxian Probe and find out just how stacked it is. And I'm paying life to do it because, honestly, I think that it's more likely that any way I crawl back into this game is via using all my mana and not via that 2 more life.
Double force.
Like, either way, 12 and 10 is 2 hits from Atraxa.
Flash.
Now, granted, 10 is a hit from an Atraxa plus an Elk, but who's counting? Yeah, now I'm writing it down. I'm like, ooh, that's a lot. And I draw Source of Plowshares, so I'm going to air quotes bait the counter spells with a Lurrus and then follow up with a Source of Plowshares. I know his hand can answer both of these, but my plan at this point is to just draw runner, perfects, and hope that it gets there. And then also putting these spells in my graveyard is going to grow my Nethergoyf as a potential attacker for Oko or a blocker for an Elk. Like, just little things I'm thinking about right now during this air quotes garbage time. Yep. I'm just gonna, I know about the misstep, but I'm just gonna plow because if this gets misstepped, maybe I top deck an Ancestral and that has to get forced or, whatever. So yeah. Nethergoyf is now sitting at a 3/4. Can't attack Oko because Atraxa can block, but it's pretty good. I just basically have to pass the turn. There's not much I can do.
Pass it back to you.
I was considering jump attacking the spirit, and if that gets me anything,
That's your
but due to his untapped orchard, it doesn't.
Trigger after, but
So
not trigger yet.
he triggers Gaia's Blessing. So Gaia's Blessing does become a point of contention this whole match, and
Guy's blessing trigger before.
Gaia's Blessing
shuffles in before
in the game one, really what he's doing here is making sure that his Oath deck in the first game is as consistent as possible. It doesn't
Shuffles in as well.
it doesn't miss out on milling itself out and just like losing a game one that it would otherwise win.
With the attraction trigger on this deck.
Yeah, he's able to shuffle that all in. I mean, Time Walk is back in the deck,
Thanks, Max. Sorry. I know.
and he's able to
making sure it worked that
tutor
way.
for it.
No reason to doubt, just making sure.
No, I
And
appreciate that.
I was pretty sure that this works the way that David just explained, but again,
Play Moto.
a match at
I
the
mostly play
stakes,
Moto 'cause
I just
really
wanted
enjoy
to make sure.
Move to resolve
You're
this.
good.
I don't play enough paper vintage. Hopefully that changes though. That was a lot of fun. Oh, there's that Time Walk. So yeah, I am screwed.
I'll choose sorcery.
Good choice. I'll concede.
So yeah, as soon as he finishes Time Walk, I'm like, yep, that's enough. I'm dead. So I scoop it up,
I'm not going to
and
card. I'm just going to.
basically at that point, there's no more meaningful decisions to be made. So there's no more like downloading David as a player.
Blocks. I thought you're not allowed to do it.
And you know, I'm just joking around the two Time
Crazy
Walks
format,
banter.
man.
I know,
It's
right?
crazy.
Oh, it's vintage, double time lock vintage.
Yeah. It's fun though. I mean, you can see we're
I
laughing.
promise you, I don't own more than one time left.
We're having fun.
I kind of want
So
to
you
own more
borrowed
than
or
one time
so you
left.
borrowed or
No, no, I own one. I own one time
that was a
left.
joke. I know it's from the shuffle. We're just I am being silly.
It's going to be silly.
You review
Yeah,
your sideboard?
we're having a good time.
Yeah, go for it.
And now we're consulting the deck lists. I'm about to read Utter Insignificance in David's sideboard. I don't know what it does at this point, and if you don't know what it does, I don't blame you. Here it is. I'm looking it up on Moto right now. Here is
Also
Utter
have my own
Insignificance.
sideboard map,
Whoops,
that you can
sorry.
review it.
Utter Significance, it's a flash aura. Enchanted creature loses all abilities, has base power and toughness 1/1, and then you can pay 2 and a colorless to exile it. The owner of Utter Insignificance can do that, so you can get rid of the card entirely. And so this is going to be good against like my Lavinias, my Containment Priests, stuff like that. So yeah, we're reviewing the deck list, we're sideboarding. You can see that David is cutting his Gaia's Blessing. And one of the reasons why he's doing that, I know that commentators were confused, is that even though he's running it so that, you know, he can't run out of oath targets, can't mill over his deck and lose, that's in game one. In game two, I'm bringing in a bunch of hate, like the Containment Priests and stuff like that. In fact, let me actually pause real quick and go over how I'm sideboarding. I can show you in Moto.
I think I lost all but like one or two.
So shuffling up for game two, we're talking about the fact that we've both been winning when we're on the draw, and so I'm asking him what he thinks. Should I take the play or should I take the draw?
Don't be too outcome oriented. Yeah, don't be
And
too
yeah,
survivor
he's telling me not to be
biased.
too results oriented, and I am going to in fact take the play. So yeah, we're shuffling up. I'm just making sure my deck is 60 cards. Let's jump ahead just a few seconds here. Okay, how's this looking? So I'm evaluating my hand, and it has an Ancestral Recall and a land in it. What's not to love?
Yes.
I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to do an upkeep Ancestral. I don't necessarily think that he has Force of Negation in his deck anymore. In fact, I don't. If he does, he definitely shouldn't. But I do want to make sure that I'm not discarding a hand size if I don't draw Moxit. So the upkeep Ancestral is a way to help hedge against that. So yeah, shuffling. This is an upkeep action here of Ancestral Recall, target myself. Draw 3 cards, not forcing David to draw 3 cards, and struggling a little bit on my shuffle. But soon it will be Ancestral Recall, target me.
Yes.
And I will be very pleased.
Well, a little embarrassing, but all ancestrals target.
Oh yeah, I also accidentally flipped an Orcish Bowmaster while I was grabbing my deck there. Let's back up and look at that real quick. So yeah,
Well,
as I'm fetching here, watch this. Boop. Flip a Bowmaster, immediately try to put it back. David sees it, he writes it down. So yeah,
well,
a little embarrassing, but
all ancestrals target.
good deal.
It happens, dude.
Still, I'm up 3 cards, so David at this point can also sense that I'm a little bit nervous. Because I'm on camera, I'm down a game, and I just flipped an Orchestra Master. Just physical dexterity issues. And after messing up the Treasure Cruise, I'm aware that I'm not playing Magic as well, physically well, as I could typically be in a lower stakes environment. So, even though I try to be in a good headspace, still sometimes nerves are nerves. I draw the Mox Jet, which is really nice. I play this out to try to play around Spell Pierce. I am going to play the Jet, and then I'm trying to figure out which creature I'm going to play here. So yeah, evaluating my hand. I've got Frog. Yeah, play the Jet. Just making sure I want to do it. And in fact, instead of jamming out Frog, I think what I'm going to do is Ponder. I'm just going to try to set up my hand to be a little bit more insulated before I go Shields down. I find a Forcible and a Containment Priest. That's fantastic. So at this point, I can't afford to shuffle fetch to shuffle because I want to draw both the Force and the Containment Priest. So my plan is to put the Forcible in my hand, so I can fight over something. And then if it all goes awry, at least I can then top deck the Containment Priest. So David draws a Forbidden Orchard for turn. He has a Strip Mine in hand. And I think he's about to use it. Or he's thinking about it. He plays it up. He just passes back to me. I very carefully pause an upkeep to make sure that if he wants to Strip Mine me in my upkeep, he is able to do so. And so this Urza Saga play, I only have access to one white source right now. And so by playing the Saga, I was kind of hoping to bait the Strip Mine onto the white source. But it looks like David's got it pegged for a Caracas or something like that. So at least for right now, I got the first trigger off the Saga. He would have been able to strip it with the trigger on the stack and deny me any mana production. That is not what happened. Very fortunate. Yeah, shuffling up, just playing carefully.
I will use Tundra and the Saga.
So yeah, I'm announcing my spell using the lands I expect most likely to be wasted. And I have a Bowmaster in hand. David literally knows I have a Bowmaster in hand because I revealed it while I was trying to cast Ancestral Recall. And so my plan here is to flash it into play when he's tapped out of blue. And I accidentally say it's fine, and then I quickly catch myself. And since no actions have been taken, I'm going to explain what happens to the judge right now.
I said that's good, and I quickly changed my mind. I would like to respond.
Okay. We picked up the searched or not?
We have not searched.
We have not. I was reaching for it.
Reaching for it, and it's an actual change of mind.
I think it is reasonable to allow your opponent to change the amount of his
Okay. That's yeah. So this is on the stack.
Cool. Thank you. I'm gonna pay 2 and flash in or just master.
So yeah, again, David obviously would have preferred that I didn't have the opportunity, but was very gracious. And again, the same way that the judge call in game 1 didn't favor me, we take it as it comes. And that's really the best way to play this sort of thing. So yeah, I get this in. And when we get back to his hand, I think we're going to see a Brainstorm in it. And so this might have been a pretty impactful play, to be quite honest with you. He might have changed his mind from getting an untapped land and brainstorming to just getting a hedge maze. Yeah, I knock it out now just so he can't cantrip in response to my Bowmaster, because otherwise that's the case. And so, yep, there's a Brainstorm in hand, way at the left. Also a Mind Twist that he can't cast. That's pretty funny. So he would be able to play Oko right now, or the Oath he has in his hand, but it doesn't do much against the Containment Priest. Oko, however, does have text, so he'll cast it.
I'm going to force the will.
Of course, Oko has enough text that I'm not particularly interested in letting it resolve. I was holding that frog as a blue pitch for Force of Will. Would have been nice to be able to resolve the frog, but that's not the way this game is looking. I need my counters, and I already have a clock in play. I draw a second Containment Priest, which is nice. I do have a second Forceful and Frog in hand as another Force and Blue Pitch. And at this point, I'll be able to basically just get the clock rolling with now 2 Containment Priests and a Bowmaster, which is going to be up to 6 per turn, and it's going to close quickly. So I misspoke on said 5 instead of 4. It's because on the die right now, the 5 was facing me, and I was just... I've been confused about adjacent numbers in this match, what can I say? 7 and 8, 4 and 5, it's tough. It's tough out there. But I think my magic fundamentals have been pretty good. So yeah, Oath is entering. I'm not fighting over that. Not only do I have a Containment Priest in play, but I'm about to have another one. And I have a Force in hand to fight over, Utter Insignificance or Lightning Bolt or anything like that. So David's going to force this one, and he's going to pitch the Brainstorm because he knows about, since the Bowmaster is in play, that's the least relevant thing. He keeps the Show and Tell probably so that if he finds a Bolas' Citadel, he's able to Show and Tell that into play and get the ball rolling. So I untap, I draw for turn, I do an Underground Sea, not particularly impactful, but not the worst, and then I just attack for 6. So I pay 3, I put Lurrus in my hand, and I keep open white for the plow, and go back to David. And yeah, David was never really in this game after I resolved that turn 1 Ancestral. And because I drink a lot of water and during the matches, as I'd already talked about, David also wanted to stretch his legs. We just take a very quick break, so I will pause and fast forward, and we'll be right back for game 3. Okay, so the raw footage I had actually did not have game 3 in it, so I had to go over to the Card Titan Twitch, and so I am a little bit at the mercy of whatever they show me as far as the camera and stuff goes, but that's okay. I can still commentate. So David's on the play now as Oath, and that's terrifying. And I'm evaluating my hand. I look at it. I can't recall exactly what it is, but it was apparently good enough for me to keep. So we're both keeping 7. And David goes Scalding Tarn, pass. And I now need to make a decision. I go Tundra, Ponder. And so I'm literally pondering. I see a Caracas, fantastic. I see a Lavinia, fantastic. And I see another Ponder. So at this point, my plan is to play a Caracas into Lavinia on turn 2 because my hand has 2 more lands in it, but they're both colorless. I have a Wasteland and I have an Urza Saga. And so I draw the Lavinia and I have Caracas on top of my library. And so, yeah. I now have access to blue-white, which is really important for casting Lavinia, and I am very happy for it. So David gets his favorite land, the Hedge Maze, and puts into play, does a little bit of Surveil action. And you can see, I have 3 colorless lands in my hand. So I have a Strip Mine, a Wasteland, and an Urza Saga. But yeah, none of those actually help to cast Lavinia, so I do need the help of the Caracas on top of my library. David does Surveil. He keeps it on top quickly, and that makes me a little bit nervous. And then he confirms that he wants it on top, draws it for turn, and he goes Orchard and casts an Oath of Druids. And so this is far more aggressive than David has been in the past. But I think also, just as I was kind of downloading David and understanding how he plays, David was doing the same to me. And so he adjusted, and at this point, I need to pivot too. I have a Containment Priest in hand, and this is actually, I think, the biggest misplay I make of the match. Watch this. I play out Caracas. That's a huge mistake here, because I was going to play out Caracas to play Lavinia, and I had figured out my land sequence, but I did not need to play this Caracas just now to play my Containment Priest. I could have played Urza Saga. I could have, which is probably the best play, but I could have played the Wasteland or Strip Mine as well. I should not have played this Caracas. Now, as David reveals this off this Oath, right now he's flipping to hit Natraxa. He already pitched one from hand. He knows about the Caracas in play. So far he's milled Strip Mine, and he's actually going to mill a lot of cards until he gets to his first Atraxa, including, in addition to that Strip Mine, both Boseiju. So his answers to Caracas are no longer in the deck. And he cut that Gaia's Blessing. And the reason why he did that is post-board, when you're bringing in answers to my answers, you've got to cut something. Like, you want that really consistent Oath game 1 to make sure your Oath engine works. But is it really worth a card slot to make sure that your oaths are just like never going to fail if oath, like the main problem is even getting oath to work in the first place, battling through my containment priest and stuff like that? I think the answer is that you need to use those card slots to answer containment priest, answer, stuff like that. So lightning bolts and under significance, those cards, the third Oko, those cards come in and the guy's blessing gets cut. And so yeah, the bolt is being picked as well as a way to answer future containment priest, Lavinia, that sort of thing. And he's picking this, and he's not taking the creature because he's already pitched an Atraxa. He has an Atraxa in play. He needs as many Atraxas as he can in his library because his library got small. I think he flipped like 30 cards or something like that. But yeah, pretty egregious misplay for me to play this Caracas, and I was very fortunate to not be punished for it. But again, if I'm cursed to lose in the finals, I mean, this is how I get there. This Caracas is going to send me all the way there. Now that said, I'm still facing down an Atraxa and an Oko. And that's huge. So I am a little bit flustered and I forgot to write down the cards that he just revealed. So what I just said is you don't have to tell me, but I forgot to write down the cards that you revealed off Atraxa. If you'd like to tell me, I would be happy to see them. And he said, basically, I'm not exactly sure what I revealed. I shuffled it to my hand, and so I'm not going to tell you. And that's fine. Like, again, nothing adversarial here. I was advocating for myself. He was advocating for himself. This is a competitive match of Magic. We both, I think, played it correctly. Like, I was correct to ask. I'd be doing myself a disservice to not ask. He was correct to decline my question, as he would be doing himself a disservice to, do what I had requested. So Oko is going to hit the table. I don't have too much to say about it, or too much I can do about it, and he's figuring out how he's going to tick it up or down. He could turn a Mox into an Elk. He could make a fresh food. He's figuring out whether or not he needs all his lands. He's trying to figure out if this Lotus is going to help hardcast a Force of Will, something like that. He doesn't actually have a Force of Will in hand right now, but yeah, a lot of cards entered play, and this is a tough decision for him to make. I believe what he does is he pluses 2 on Oko to make a food. And sure enough, there it is. And passes back to me. I draw for turn. And I draw that Ponder that I know about. And I'm just like, this is not good. So one thing I realize at this point is I need to kind of close the door on a lot of things that can go wrong, including continual oaths. So I'm going to ponder first. I'm going to look at the top. I need a black source for my frogs. I find a Scalding Tarn. I find a frog. And I'm like, yeah, this is fine. We keep it. So I'm looking at my hand, looking at this ponder. And then I make a decision to keep this and draw. I'm just being really methodical, making sure I remember what those cards are because I'm not going to be able to look at them again. Them on top, draw with the ponder, and I draw a Force of Will. Fantastic. And then again, I have a frog and a black source on top. I waste the Forbidden Orchard to kind of close the door on making more spirits. He immediately has a choice of whether or not he wants to give me another spirit. He declines. At this point, the Caracas is already tagged to send Atraxa back to hand in this turn cycle, but there's no reason to do it yet. May as well wait till after the Oath, and at this point I'm also trying to clear creatures off my side of the board to reduce the risk of more Oath happening. So yeah, got rid of that spirit. David's life total is essentially irrelevant. Once I get controls again, I can kind of take him down from any, non-infinite life total. And so yeah, he's making an Elk here, and so he has a 7/7 and a 3/3. He attacks, and I bounce the 7/7 Atraxa back to his hand. So now I'm going to ask the judge a question away from the table, and that question is going to be, who is responsible for David's Oath trigger? I want to make sure that it's him being responsible for it, and not my trigger to either hit or miss. So obviously I remember the Oath trigger, I know about it, but I don't want to like point it out this time around and then ask, as the game progresses, all of a sudden I forget to bring up David's Oath trigger. And then that would lead to some awkward situation. Like I've been bringing up his Oath trigger, then I forgot to talk about it. And all of a sudden we've missed it. And it's like, do I get it or not? And so I asked to go to my draw step. I draw the card, I draw it face down, put it right there, very clearly not in my hand. And I then bring up, I would like to Oath. And I want David to acknowledge the trigger for me. And so this is a way to say, hey, this is a trigger I want, but I also want to make sure that you know that it's your trigger and that you need to do this for me, whether or not you want to. And so, yeah, it's all good. I milled that Tarn, which is a little bit of a mistake, actually. But I had pondered, not necessarily knowing I was going to Oath, and I very, very fortunately draw another Scalding Tarn, or another Fetch Land. So I'm able to still get my Black Source. Yeah, it was another Scalding Tarn. Again, extremely lucky draw on my behalf, but yeah, we take this. If you're going to win a tournament, you got to get lucky in spots, and this is one of them. Scalding Tarn, or sorry, not Scalding Tarn, Psychic Frog actually tangles quite well with Elks because the +1/+1 counters from things that you discard actually stick around. So you can pretty easily make Psychic Frog a 4/4 in a world of 3/3s. Yeah, shuffling up, and let's see what I do. I play a Lavinia, I believe, and I hold up Caracas because I know that David has a lightning bolt. I do remember that part of his reveal. And so I am also looking at my graveyard here and considering casting a Delve spell maybe. But I think that Lavinia is the play I make this turn. I'm debating it. And yep. Oh yeah, I do have a Treasure Cruise in hand. That's funny. But yeah, I cast Lavinia first. Because I figure that if Lavinia hits the table, then my other spells are far more likely to resolve. And she resolves. It's wonderful. So yeah, David does have a lightning bolt for her, but if he needs to point that lightning bolt at the Psychic Frog, then all of a sudden he doesn't have a lightning bolt for Lavinia anymore. Also of note, he can no longer Force of Will because he can't cast anything higher than CMC2. This Oko, of course, can also start turning things into Elks on my side of the table, but he is trying to close the game and increase his board presence because he doesn't have that many cards in the library. He can't Oath anymore, like without risking losing. And he wants to just basically end the game as quickly as possible. So I know about this Lightning Bolt. And what I'm trying to do here is make sure that Lightning Bolt does not kill my poor Lavinia. So my plan is to try to trade Psychic Frog for Elk plus Bolt. And that's a fine trade for me. Because also at this point, if for some reason that doesn't work out and I end up with only one creature in play because I lose this exchange, I get an Oath on my turn. But I discard the Strip Mine to put a counter on the Frog. At this point, I'm proposing to put a counter on the Frog. I'm about to take it off the Frog and kind of look at it, see if he wants to respond. Yeah, he allows it to happen. So now Frog has 3 toughness, then Frog goes up to 4, so it's now a 3/4 and no longer in bolt range, at least not until it takes 3 damage from the Elk. Also, I was hemming and hawing about whether to block the food token or the literal Mox, and I decided that I think that it's just slightly better to get rid of the Mox. Because say there's a world where I bounce something back to his hand, or he bounces something back to his hand or whatever, the token won't bounce back to hand, but the Mox will. So yeah, he's looking at what spell he wants to cast here. He has a Lightning Bolt, but I think he also at this point has an Utter Significance that he's going to prefer to cast first. He's going to crack his Lotus for triple blue and cast an Utter Insignificance, targeting my Psychic Frog. He has 1 blue floating, and that's what that die is representing. And I'm thinking about it because what it's going to do, it's going to turn my Frog from a 3/4 into a 3/3. So I'll need to discard another card in order to stay above water on Lightning Bolt range. And I'm going to discard another Psychic Frog in order to do that. Because, again, a 4/4 frog is huge, and I really, really want to make sure that David points his lightning bolt at my Psychic Frog. I don't want him to be able to bolt my Lavinia. And so, basically, exhausting the Lavinia answers on the frog is the name of the game for me here. So the frog wins combat. I take 3, as you'll see in just a minute. Here we go. The jet is dead, and the bolt finishes the job on the frog. I'd have to discard 3 more cards in order to have this frog survive, and that's not worth it. Or no, I can't even do that because it's lost all its abilities. It is utterly insignificant. So yeah, those cards are gone. I untap. There's no oath trigger. David pauses just to make sure. I drop return. And I am going to cast a treasure cruise for the second time. I am going to mess this up yet again because I'm flustered from the first time I messed this up. And again, I'm going to be counting to 8 because treasure cruise costs 8, and I'm going to be counting 8 cards in my graveyard as I do that, and it's just a cluster, let me tell you. That frog doesn't need to be there, as I will soon realize as I recount it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, that's too many. Frog stays in the yard. Here's 7. Here's 1. And we have successfully cast a treasure cruise. I have paid the right admission price for the cruise. What a relief. The judge is like, hey, what happened here? And I'm like, I'm just trying to cast my treasure cruise, man. It's hard. So yeah, we did it. And fortunately, it resolves. I draw 3. We'd love to see it. So I draw a jet. Very nice. And I also draw a Psychic Frog. So my plan is jet, frog, and I still have Forcible backup in my hand. So yeah, I think frog is going to hit play, and I'm going to attack Lavinia, or attack with Lavinia to put Oko down to 6. This is definitely the hardest match of Vintage I played during the day. Oh no, I actually leave up mana. What am I doing? Do I have something I can respond with? I don't know. I don't know what my hand is right now. I would have expected I played a Psychic Frog. Oh, I have a backup Containment Priest. That makes sense. Okay. So yeah, I'm holding Frog for another turn cycle. I just wanted to make sure that I get Containment Priest in play to make sure no Oath shenanigans happen to me. Because, you know, Oath is still active. It's on the board. So yeah, I'm attacking Oko down to 4, and now I think I played the Psychic Frog. And I'm holding up all 3 colors of mana, including Caracas for my Lavinia, and Frog enters the battlefield. Love to see it. At this point, David's in trouble. He's looking at the massive graveyard he has, seeing what cards are still left in his library. I think he's about to give his library a quick count as well. But yeah, spoiler alert, it's not that many cards. I think it's something like 7 cards. So yeah, he's going to count them out. I ask him how many. I think he tells me it's like 7. And that's that. He's got a draw for turn. Puts it to 6 cards. Yep. Okay, and so now I've got some serious pressure on him with my board. And this frog is also going to create an insurmountable advantage unless he answers it quickly. And so he's pretty much lost by this point. Like, there's not too much he can do. So his best bet, I think, is to just build as big of a board presence as he can. He can't cast Mox into Elk them, or he can't resolve them at least because of my Lavinia. So he's going to Elk his food token. Sorry, he's going to Elk my frog just to kind of close the door on it. Next turn, he's going to Elk the food token. I discard Lowe's Petal in order to have a 4/4 frog. I held the petal back last turn because of this exact interaction. He discards an Oath of Druids to hand size. I'm, again, not quite sure. I don't quite remember what I drew here. But I do think that I'm just going to attack the 4/4 frog into the Oko and shrink it up. Because he can't block with a single elk, or at least not successfully. And second main phase, I'm going to put Lurrus into my hand because I can start casting stuff from the graveyard. He draws for turn. And yeah, this Oko is at 1 loyalty, which is far less loyalty than you usually see an Oko at. It's got a food token now, and now I can't attack with the frog into it. He casts a Sapphire to try to, get ahead of turn cycle in the elk. Totally good to do that. It's just a challenge check. I do remember my Lavinia trigger and counter it. But yeah, that's not scummy play. That's good play on his side. Play to your outs, and one of his outs is I miss it. So I play a Lurrus. At this point, he's being flustered. He's not legally allowed to cast that Force of Will. Not regardless of the counter. He has 2 mana in play, 2 lands, and that's CMC 5, so it can't be cast. And so the judge just rules that he gets a warning for a GRV. It goes back to hand. Nothing scummy here. He was just getting flustered from, somehow losing this game that he felt very, very far ahead. And was like, what? And just not thinking about everything going on. He was trying to challenge check me and just briefly forgot that he couldn't even try to challenge check me that way. Lurrus resolves. I cast a petal from the yard and I pass back. I plan to, be able to cast more of the frogs and containment priests from the yard if the game proceeds. David just draws for turn, sees what's going on. And what does he find? +2s to make a food. And my board is a lot better than his. I think that he's I guess the only way that I can win is to Alpha Strike. So I think he's going to Alpha Strike maybe next turn. One more turn of building up a board behind Oko and then just try to get me to 0 somehow. So yeah, discards Atraxa for turn or to hand size. And so I draw. I'm feeling fantastic in the driver's seat. I sack the petal and play a Brainstorm because I'm just going to recast the petal. I'm just trying to get ahead on mana. I also think I briefly forget that I can cast creatures out of my graveyard with Containment Priest because they're a cast that works just fine. But I just think I'm just tunnel visioning on the petal and in my head I'm shortcutting Containment Priest to Graph Trigger's Cage, which is a mistake. I now knock David down to 1 land, which is huge because he can't even cast anything with CMC 2 or more. And at this point, I just hang back because also I don't need to deal in lethal. He's 3 cards away from decking. And so as long as I don't die, I can't lose. And so I'm holding a bunch of counter magic in my hand, and I'm just going to make sure that I don't lose the game. I'll go up to 5 to make another elk. And what do you do, David? 3 cards there. He sends. And I am going to flash in a Containment Priest to double block one of the elks. I'm going to block another one of the elks with my 4/4. I'm going to keep the Lurrus safe. I'm going to keep the Lavinia safe. Even though I could block and bounce them, that leaves room for a 1 mana interaction spell to deal with them. And I'm not in the market for that. So I'll just take 3, go from 10 to 7, knock 2 elks off the table, and be able to kill Oko on the backswing, which removes his threat. And at this point, I have the game locked up. Feels good to win that game, let me tell you. And yeah, David just concedes. Fantastic. And I just kind of dropped the hand to kind of show the viewers what I have going on, which is just a bunch of counter magic still. That felt good. Anyway, on to the finals. See you all in a minute.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we're in the finals, which is the thing that I thought I was cursed to lose. But again, I'm on the draw because Chase is the higher seed. You can see his hand has that Mishra's Bauble that is hard to evaluate an opening hand with. He has 1 land, a Bauble, some forces, a Fatal Push.
I'll also keep this one.
If it's a land, it's a fantastic hand. If it's a non-land, it's kind of dead. He looks at the top of my library. I don't know what it is yet. He plays a land and passes. So you hear me, I very clearly ask draw in order to acknowledge that we are no longer in my upkeep. So I'm not trying to rush. I just don't draw for turn and go and do, hey, my bubble trigger. I go, draw. And so by doing that, what I do is just say, it's with no ambiguity, hey, you missed your bubble trigger. And that's kind of when I realized that, maybe I do actually win this match. Obviously, we're both pretty nervous being in a high-stakes finals match, but I also just won what was kind of felt like an unwinnable game to go into this, so I'm feeling pretty good. He probes, here's my hand. It's got a Wasteland, a Flooded Strand, Lorien Revealed, Ponder, Force of Will, and a Plow. It's a very balanced hand. It's got basically a Tundra and then a replacement of any land that gets Wastelanded, so my colors are stable. And I'm just going to try to get this Nethergoyf large, so I'm going to fetch. And I believe that... Let's see what I do here. There's a lot of ways I could play this game.
I'll attempt to cast a Psychic Frog.
I'm going to Force of Will. So
Yeah, I'm just going to try to run away with the game, get ahead as possible, so I'm just going to cast a frog here. And so I do it in my first main phase because if it doesn't resolve, then at least I'll be able to grow the Nethergoyf. So yeah, frog. There's a force on it. I am going to counter back because he has no lands in play, and if I can run away with this frog, then I just run with the game. So this also does put an instant in my yard to grow the Nethergoyf.
I will force negation your Force of Will.
So he counters back again.
Force of Will gets exiled.
I lose the Force of Will, but frog goes to the yard. Nethergoyf attacks for 2.
I'm at 15.
Go ahead.
And so yeah, he spent a lot of cards to do that, and he draws a Strip Mine to cast.
At 18, my opponent at 15.
They're confirming life totals just off Nethergoyf size. I think there's a little bit of confusion just among people the size of Nethergoyf because it only counts my graveyard. So he plays out of Vexing Bubble. I think his hope is that he's able to cycle it. He knows about my Wasteland, so I don't quite get that. I also just draw an Ancestral Recall for the Rubbins, so because of Vexing Bubble, he can't counter that. So I will Ancestral myself and then go from there. 1, 2, and 3. So, of course I can't use 2 creatures, so I just waste the Strip Mine. And now Nethergoyf is a 3/4, and I'm going to Ponder first to get a Sorcerer in the yard, really just, and get a 4/5 Nethergoyf in for the shortening the clock and the game as soon as possible.
Let's do it like...
And there's lands on top, and I love that. So right now, I'm just trying to put the Underground Sea on top because I want to make sure that I can't get wasted off of playing more creatures. Also, having a Wasteland is great because that allows me to blow up any land that he might top deck. So he didn't, but yeah, very fortunate for me that his deck. One thing I was checking when I was reviewing it is he doesn't actually have that many colored sources in his deck. He has 13 blue and 13 black initial sources. Meanwhile, I have 17 blue, 15 white, and 14 black. So even though I'm a 3-color deck, I did make a lot of hedges to my deck to make the mana more consistent. I don't really need to go into huge detail on how I sideboard to there. I'll do it during the sideboard section right after this. But what I did is I cut the 3 Force Negation, added in my 2 sideboard Fatal Push and my sideboard Nihil Spellbomb.
I lied about the trying to do no blowout thing.
Yeah, we were joking before the match started about having a good match with no blowouts, and I said sounds good. But then, I mean, I'm gonna do blowouts if I can. Let's get some free wins. Yeah, we're sideboarding here. I'll skip ahead to where we are all ready, mulliganed or drawn up for game 2. So yeah, he tries this hand. It has 2 Polluted Dells in it and an Underground Sea, very stable mana. I have a pretty good hand as well. I have a Mental Misstep for any ancestral shenanigans. I have a Mox Pearl so that I have permanent white but also can play around days. So, learning from my match against Dave Kaplan, I lead on Underground Sea before I played the pedal, so I can't get dazed. And it's funny because he actually did have a daze in hand. So, yeah, I'm evolving as a player. He attempts to shortcut double fetch. I'm happy with that. So he gets Island Swamp, which I can't wasteland, which is hilarious because I would have loved another easy game, but we'll take the game that we actually have to play through.
I admire your
Yeah, what I was gonna say is I admire your commitment to stable mana, but
I can't help myself.
I was kind of short on words right now. I was feeling pretty stressed, to be honest. I'm laughing, I'm joking, but the stakes are there. I really wanted to be the champion, so I wanted to try my best. And so at this point, I don't have a counter spell, but I do have a source of plowshares, so I'll just fire it off. He has a force, and so he's going to protect the frog to run with the game. Unfortunately for me, what this means is he's down 2 cards off this interaction, and I'm going to essentially have frog superiority when I cast and resolve my psychic frog. I play my land, and I play a frog.
I'd like to play frog man.
So at this point, I have 4 cards in hand. He has 3. And so if he draws for turn, or once he draws for turn, I'll have equally sized frogs. If he plays a land, then we will no longer have equally sized frogs. Plays anything out. So he's got to make his choice. He plays the strip mine, so now he no longer has the ability to have a frog bigger than mine. He also taps out of black, so I'm no longer concerned about removal. So if he attacked with frog, I would block and essentially just keep discarding cards until I won combat. That is how I would do it. And then I would keep Mental Misstep as my last card in order to counter a Fatal Push. That's how I would run that if we did it. However, I just drew a Fatal Push, so I'll use that fetch land that I had in hand from earlier, get a black source, and Fatal Push the frog and just attack that way. It's a much simpler way to do this as opposed to assume risk through frog discarding and whatnot. So, also looking at his hand of Underground Sea Days, my hand is better than his. So I didn't know that at the time, but I was trying not to assume risk, and I think that mutually discarding would have benefited him given the quality of his hand. Yeah. I have that Bowmaster from the opening, I have that Mental Misstep from the opening. I'm just kind of looking for the right spot to use them. I've been pretty constrained on black, so I haven't had a real good spot to get the Bowmaster in play yet. But frog comes in, and I'm not discarding anything. I draw a card, which is a great spot to be. Another wasteland, which does not waste the cards in play, but we deal. He draws a force, so now he has a force blue card and 2 mox, a land and a mox. So he has the counterspell. He's going to put Lurrus in hand and just kind of try to protect Lurrus and regrow things from his graveyard. And tap, I draw another Goyf.
I'll go to combat.
And so I'm just going to attack.
No effects before damage.
It's just to, I draw a card, draw Ancestral, love it.
I will use the card to draw 3 cards.
And so, yeah, I make it pretty clear I top decked Ancestral, which is kind of funny. Yeah,
Force succeeds.
so he forces that, doesn't quite work out in my favor, but that's fine. Because at least now I can
Wastelander
play Wasteland to take him off of being able to cast Lurrus, and then I can deploy another Goyf safely around days, and also hold back the Bowmaster until I think it becomes relevant. The Nether Goyf is a larger clock, and so I'm just doing it this way. Let's just go to 13, finds the Underground Sea, so he's able to cast Lurrus. And then I want this Treasure Cruise in my hand to resolve, so he's going to cast a, the graveyard removal card from his graveyard, and I'm going to Mental Misstep it. That Mental Misstep I had from my opening hand, this is the spot for it because I need that cruise to resolve. Soul Guide Lantern, that's the name of it. Anyway, yeah, I counted that thing. I draw a force, which hopefully I draw a blue card in the top 3. I'm briefly weighing the fact that I will have to use the blue card in hand to do it,
This is currently
So
a
I'm going to
2/3
attack
for some
first
60
because I'm going to have to nuke
Sure.
my graveyard to cast the Treasure
blocks.
Cruise.
No effects before damage. So
And then I
take
draw
3 out of 10.
off the frog and see what I find. Maybe I find a blue card and have extra insulation. I don't find a blue card. I do find a Vexing Bauble though. But yeah, just firing off a Treasure Cruise.
I've been bad
At this
this all day.
point, before I tap my extra mana, I'm going to empty the graveyard.
1, 2, 3, 4,
So
5, 6,
that's how I'm doing this so I don't overpay.
Declaration of Treasure Cruise.
And I was very clear that this is how I'm doing it, and it worked.
2, 3.
Look at me, I'm learning. So I draw lands and a frog and a force and a Vexing Bubble. We're in a good spot. But I think first things first, I'm gonna try to get this Orcish Bowmaster down. Maybe I can bait him into attacking with the Lurrus, then ambush Viper the Lurrus. That's my plan. So he draws a Ponder, and he's gonna cast it here. And yes, he's thinking, and I'm just gonna flash the Bowmaster now because that just kills Lurrus, one off the trigger, one off the Ponder draw, and he skips it up. And I am your eternal weekend champion. Look at that. Look how happy I am. Go me. So yeah, that's how I did it. That's really cool. So anyway, let's go into that sideboard guide I promised you. So yeah, wow. I broke the curse. Don't know how I pulled it off, but I did. And that means that I'm your vintage champion. It also means that I'm now able to, lose in the top 8 and the top 4 if I'm 5th seed, but it also means that I'm capable of winning. And speaking of winning, I was able to use my winnings to acquire another piece of power. So that's pretty sweet. I'm really excited for that. I now own 4 pieces between the Sapphire I bought at the beginning and then the Time Walk and Ancestral Recall that I traded the Tinker for. And now finally this Mox Jet that I bought with some of the pricing. So yeah, it's really something special to, fly to Pittsburgh for Eternal Weekend, borrowing all the power, owning none of it, and then walking away, owning 4 pieces of my own that I will get to run back as I try to defend my title next year for Vintage Champion. And so yeah, hugely, hugely cool event, really, really special. And yeah, here's that sideboard guide I promised you for Esper Lurrus. I'm going to go camera off so I can just kind of talk through it. Okay, so against the Mirror / Blue-Black Lurrus / Bug Control, we board the same. We cut the Force Negations, we bring in 2 Fatal Push and Nihil Spellbomb. That's all pretty straightforward stuff. You don't really want the Force Negations to counter extra stuff. You're not trying to 2-4 yourself too far gone. The Vexing Bauble is solid just at kind of getting advantage or recurring with Lurrus. Or removal is good. The Spellbomb is good just as kind of nuking the graveyard. So these out, these in, and we call it a day. Not too much thought. So against like Tinker Breach style decks, which play like Hull Breacher and stuff like that as well, I'm cutting 2 Plow, not all of them. I'm cutting the Nether Goyf because even though it's a decent clock in game 1, it's just a beater with no real abilities. And then I think I kind of just want to cut the pedal because I'm going to be bringing in Null Rods. So I'm going to put 2 Null Rods in. I'm going to add the Nihil Spellbomb. And I will add in the Mindbreak Trap just because they're casting a lot of spells and also Mindbreak exiles things. So, you can exile the Brain Freeze or exile the Lotus and they can't keep recasting. So against Tinker Breach, this is what I do. 2 Plows out, Nether Goyf out, Pedal out. 2 Null Rods in, Spellbomb in, Mindbreak Trap in. Okay, so against Jewel, I do the following. I cut the Nether Goyf because, again, it's kind of just a beat stick. I have better cards. Cut 2 of the 4 Plows because they're bringing in Wormcoil engines. They are bringing in Hull Breachers. They're bringing in Masticore, stuff like that. So I do want some Plows still. They could Phyrexian Metamorph my stuff. So yeah, Plows are good. Crocus is really not that good of a card here. It's a non-basic planes. They don't really have legendary permanents, and they're not removing my stuff that often. Nihil Spellbomb, they don't really operate out of the graveyard, and Vexing Bauble, I need to counter their stuff, so I don't really want to turn off counter spells. And again, I'm playing Null Rod, so I wouldn't even be able to pop the Bauble at will. I am bringing in those 2 Null Rods, as I mentioned. I'm bringing in Pithy Needle. Usually names the One Ring, could technically name Karn the Great Creator or Urza's Saga as well. And then Mind Break Trap because they often counter or cast a lot of spells in a given turn, or you can just tap 4 to counter a big spell. Consigned Memory, of course, counters the colorless stuff, counters stuff triggered abilities like a jewel entering the battlefield to draw 3 cards. So you can just consign that if for some reason you weren't able to consign it on the way down for whatever reason. I don't know. But anyway, Consigned to Memory, great card in the matchup. So yeah, these 6 out, these 6 in against Jewel. So against Oath, what I definitely like to cut is 2 Swords of Plowshares, not all of them, as I mentioned in the match against David. The part of the plan is to be able to answer a Resolve Atraxa, and so 2 plows stay in, 2 plows get cut. Cut the Nethergoyf for the reasons I've already mentioned. Spellbomb because they mostly don't operate out of the graveyard, and the Vexing Bubble because I need to counter their stuff. They don't need to counter mine nearly as hard. And then I bring in the 4 Containment Priest and Mind Break Trap as pretty easy adds. Mind Break Trap is good over like a big Oath battle or what have you. You can just trap all their stuff, get rid of it, or just pay 4 to counter something. So at the last moment against David, I usually bring in Bowmaster or cut Bowmaster, bring Consigned Memory. And against David, I felt like I kind of wanted the Bowmasters. I'm not super sure on that. But yeah, maybe Consigned Memory, maybe Bowmaster. I'm honestly not sure. Try it out. Tell me what you prefer. But maybe these come in, maybe these come out. Maybe you just kind of keep one of each and see what happens. I don't know. So against Dredge, I do the following. I cut 3 Force Negations because the cards that they're casting, the non-creature spells, they're cast on my turn, so Force Negation doesn't really work. Dressdown has almost no text against them. I cut 2 plows and 1 Lavinia. Lavinia is like fine-ish. Maybe I should be cutting the Vexing Bubble instead. I'm not sure. But Nethergoyf actually tangles pretty well with their creatures. Nethergoyf can get pretty big pretty fast. And I bring Containment Priest for reasons that should be obvious. Starts off creatures entering without being cast from the graveyard. And Nihil Spellbomb to nuke their yard, Pithing Needle to name Bazaar of Baghdad, and Tabernacle to destroy all those creatures that entered because they can't pay to keep them around. So yeah, this is how I sideboard against Dredge. You don't really see Hollowvine that much anymore. Let me actually correct this real quick. See, Hollowvine. There we go. You don't really see Hollowvine that much anymore, but against, the Countervine deck or whatever we call it, this is how I'd sideboard. Cut the Fawns, cut the Dressdown, cut the Spell Pierces, bring in Tabernacle, Pith Needle, Spell Bombs, and I'll bring in 3 Containment Priests because they don't actually do all that much in the matchup. They're fine, but like they shut off the Vengevine part, but they're not like incredible. They don't shut off badness. So the sideboard plan against Doomsday is pretty straightforward. I'm cutting 2 of the plows because they often bring in like Murktide Regent, Shieldred, that sort of thing. Sometimes they have Psychic Frog. Sometimes they cast Oracle with a non-empty library. So 2 plows is still pretty good. And they really don't operate out of the graveyard too hard, aside from like prematurely nuking for a Murktide, but that's kind of hard to time. I bring in Mind Break Trap because, beats fast Doomsday stuff, and 2 Consigned Memories because it beats the Thassa's Oracle trigger. Again, very straightforward stuff. So, sideboarding against Mono White Initiative is actually different on the play and the draw. So, when I'm on the draw, this is how I sideboard. I cut the Spell Pierces because I don't have the mana ahead of time to cast them. I cut the 2 Lavinias because they have Caracas. The 2/2 doesn't tangle that well in combat, and they've already cast their free spells. And I cut Nihil Spellbomb because it doesn't operate out of the graveyard. Mind Break Trap is good against like Mox, Cavern creature plays. The Fatal Pushes are great against, their creatures themselves. Consigned Memory can stop the initial initiative trigger. It can stop the initiative after they enter the room from the trigger happening. There's a lot of good things you can do with Consigned Memory. You can counter a Chrome Mox, Trinisphere, Chalice, what have you. So Consigned Memory is good. So this is how I sideboard on the draw. Now on the play, I no longer need the Force Negations to counter the artifact mana. So what I do is I bring in the 2 Spell Pierces and 1 of my Lavinias, because getting at turn 1 Lavinia, I can counter their artifacts like that. And then I cut the 3 force negations to bring in the same 5 cards. So, yep, that's how I sideboard against Mono White Initiative. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video sideboard guide. You can go ahead and write it down, but that's on you. Okay, so now without further ado, on to Legacy. So yeah, that's right, your fair blue player played some Sneak and Show in Legacy, which is not something that I typically had done, but it was something that was a pretty cool experience. I played a showcase challenge with the deck right before I left for Eternal Weekend, and I went 6-3 in that, which felt pretty solid. The deck felt strong, and I knew I was really going to be strong against the Ancient Tomb decks, which is where I wanted to be in Legacy. I felt like Froginator was kind of on the downswing, more blue-black tempo, better suited to combat the rise of Ancient Tomb, and so I expected to face less Froginator, more tempo, and be well suited to beat the Ancient Tomb decks as Sneak and Show. I also made a few card choice hedges to be a little bit better against Death and Taxes, which doesn't exist that much online, but it is a favorite among paper players. So I wanted to make sure that I was at least properly suited to be able to win a match against Death and Taxes. So you'll notice that I have 1 Archon of Cruelty in here as a non-legendary creature, and I also have 1 Omniscience in the deck, because it doesn't matter if they just bounce your Emrakul, because you can just cast it again and get another extra turn. Also, a lot of people are playing and asked about Yggdrasil, the Rebirth Engine. And so what this card does is when it enters the battlefield, you exile all creature cards from your graveyard. I'm reading it to make sure I'm right. And then tap, exile the top 3 cards of your graveyard. Or sorry, I misspoke. Tap, exile the top 3 cards of your library. And then it also has another ability, 4 mana tap, put a creature card exiled with Yggdrasil onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. It does not have an exile clause at the end of that, so that creature sticks around. This card obviously seems pretty strong. It's 3 mana to get going. You usually don't have a creature in your graveyard, but you kind of just like tap it a couple times and hopefully hit one, or you sculpt with a cantrip like a Ponder or Brainstorm to make sure you hit one, and then 4 mana tap to put that creature in play. It just kind of increases your threat density. People are playing it over the One Ring, just as a comparison. And the card seems fine. I did some math, and going in blind, you're like roughly 2/3 to hit in those top 6 cards to find a creature, like any creature. And then, of course, you have to spend another 3rd turn to activate it to put the creature into play. And that fail rate there didn't really seem like an extra risk I wanted to assume. In those same 3 turns, the One Ring will have drawn 6 cards. And I know what that does, and it gives me a protection for a turn. I really like the One Ring. And so I wanted to play with the card I knew, as opposed to play test round 1 with this card that I wasn't really that familiar with. So I got that out of here and I played this. Another thing to note is, with my Flooded Strand Scalding Tarn split that you saw in both Vintage and now again in Legacy, I had lent a friend Froginator for the event, and so my Polluted Deltas and Misty Rainforests were tied up with him. And so obviously it's more optimal for this to run 4 Scalding Tarns and then run like a couple Flooded Strands, a Misty and a Delta, or like more Deltas, because people might misread you to be on a Froginator. There's a lot of ways to do it, but these were the fetches that I still had in my possession, so this is what I played with. I think it matters a little bit, and if you want to be fully optimal, you should split those and probably buy a Stored Delta for maximum deck ambiguity, but this is again what I had, and this is what I played with. Also, kind of funny, little aside, but a lot of people kind of read me to be, a fair blue player. They see my card art choices, they see how I dress, how I present myself, and they don't really read me as a Sneak and Show player, but they do read me as a Jeskai Control player, which is funny because I played Miracles for years. So a lot of people, like, as I'm playing these Tarns and Flooded Strands and Cantripping and whatnot, are like, oh, Jeskai Control doing well, that's weird, until I cast a Show and Tell and they're like, you monster. But anyway, yeah, kind of just a funny little aside here that's I played not quite an optimal list there, but it's close enough. And then moving over to the sideboard, I played a little bit more permanent removal than I think most of the online Sneak and Show lists. Again, as a hedge against death and taxes. So I played 2 Furies and 2 Abrades, kind of as ways to blow things up. Furies are actually pretty nasty with sneak attack, as well as, good ETBs can really ambush Viper someone. So, spoiler alert, I didn't play against death and taxes, but here is what I played against. Round 1, I 2-1 Cephalid Breakfast. I lost round 1, 1, 2, and 3. Round 2, I 2-1 Blue-Black Reanimator. Round 3, I 2-0'd Mystic Forge combo. Round 4, I 2-0'd Eldrazi Stompy. Round 5, I played against Frognator for the second time. My luck ran out a little bit, and I got O2'd. Or I lost O2, I should say. Round 6, I played against Painter, and I won 2-0. Again, Ancient Tomb deck. Round 7, I played against Mono Red Prison. I won 2-0, noticing a pattern here. Round 8, I played against a Frognator deck with 4 main deck Stifles. Now, if you'll notice that Atraxa has a trigger, Emrakul has, an Annihilator trigger, Archon of Cruelty has a trigger. A lot of what I need is to have resolve is stifleable. And so my opponent did some nasty things against me, like I would cast Show and Tell. And he'd be like, okay, he put in a land and he'd stifle my Atraxa trigger. And then he'd Entomb Reanimate. Or I would cast Show and Tell, and then the second time he cast Entomb. And then he put Animate Dead into play and just brought back an Archon of Cruelty to blow up my Emrakul. Like, he got me. He got me good. And then post-board, he also was able to bring in the Thought Seizes that he had cut from the main deck in order to fit the Stifles. So it was an uphill battle. I did manage to get a game off him somehow. But yeah, I lost round 8, 2-1 to Steve. And then round 9, I played against a Ninjas player who I actually know from playing against him online quite a bit. And so I knew what he was on. And I was able to keep a Vexian Bauble hand and 2-0'd Blue-Black Ninjas in round 9. Round 10, I played against actually my round 2 Vintage opponent, this time on his beautifully foiled out Mono Red Painter deck. And game 1, he beat me after I had Show and Tell a sneak attack and was basically trying to leverage, Emrakul to annihilate and stuff like that by juggling his own Chaos Defiler. In and out, he had a Goblin Welder and a Goblin Engineer, and he played that game very, very well to win it. In fact, I don't think if I was in his shoes, I would have won. I think that he won a game that I couldn't have. So that props to Jacob for that. Unfortunately, his luck ran out a little bit, and I managed to kind of bully him in games 2 and 3 with some powerful Sneak and Show draws. And then round 11, I was 8-2 live for the crop rotation if I won. And I faced Dom Harvey, who's a great, great Magic player. And actually my round 1 Vintage opponent from last year, Eternal Weekend 2023. My first Eternal Weekend. So I sit down and I'm here for Vintage against Dom Harvey. And I somehow eke out a win last year. But this year he got his revenge. He 2-0'd me. He was on Frognator. And so I ended up 8-3 to 79th place. Dom ended up in 25th place, so he got the crop brought, and very cool for him. And you'll notice that I played against Frognator 4 times, and I went 1-3 against it, and I won everything else. So my read on the meta, or what the deck was good against, was correct. I think that actually as a whole, Frognator was a little bit on the downswing, and there was a good amount of blue-black tempo in the room, but that's just not what I faced. And honestly, in a big tournament, you can't control what you face. You'll hit some amount of variance. You're not just going to play exactly the percentages that MTG Goldfish determines that you should. That's just not how it works. And so I played against the matchup I didn't want to see 4 times and went 1-3 in that matchup and won everything else. What you going to do? That's a really solid showing. And so, yeah, I'm proud of myself for how I chose the deck for this. I went a little bit out of my comfort zone. And it worked well. I think I did very well given those circumstances. So yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. And I want to shout out a lot of my friends that I got to see in Pittsburgh. Some new friends I got to make. So yeah, the Cabal, shout out. Love you guys very much. And then some of the New York crew. I want to really thank Roland Cheng for accepting me with open arms into the vintage community, helping me make some new friends, enjoy some very nice bourbons. And also to my opponents, thank you for all being really cool people. It was great to meet all of you and to play against you. It was an honor. I hope you enjoyed our matches as much as I did. And I hope to see you all next year. I guess I have a title to defend. So anyway, bye-bye. Regular challenge videos will resume next week. Have a happy holiday season, and I'll see you soon.